Chapter 51, The Final Deal. Maya POV. The boardroom table was no longer a battlefield. It was a relic. I sat at the head of the oak surface, the morning sun of Manhattan casting long, sharp shadows across the faces of the 12 men and women who still held the title of shareholder representatives. They looked uncomfortable. They were used to a room that smelled of fear and expensive leather. Now, the room smelled of fresh air from the cracked windows and the peppermint tea I had insisted on serving. Beside me, Alexander sat in his consultant chair. He was wearing a dark gray sweater and trousers, no blazer, no tie, no cufflinks. He looked relaxed, his fingers loosely interlaced on the table, but I could feel the hum of his focus. He wasn't the shark today, he was the anchor. "The proposal is on your tablets," I said, my voice steady and clear. "It is the final deal for the Sterling Blackwood restructuring. We are moving 51% of the foundation's voting shares into a public science trust. The board will no longer have the power to lock in patents or suppress data. From this moment forward, the Horizon Project belongs to the patients, not the portfolio." A man named Henderson, the last of my father's old enemies who hadn't been indicted, let out a sound that was half chuckle, half choke. "You're liquidating the leverage, Maya," he said, shaking his head. "You're turning the most valuable asset in the history of the medical industry into a library book. The shareholders will sue. They'll claim you're intentionally devaluing the firm." "Let them," Alexander said, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that made the air in the room tighten. Every head turned toward him. The old fear was still there, buried deep in their marrow. They expected him to follow up with a threat, a legal maneuver, or a hostile buyout. "I've spent 15 years devaluing lives for the sake of leverage," Alexander continued, leaning forward. "I know exactly what a lawsuit looks like. And I'm telling you right now, Henderson, that the moment you file, I will release the full audit of the 2012 Knight Agreement payouts. I'll show the world exactly which board members took a bonus to look the other way while my mother destroyed a woman's career." The room went deathly silent. "The final deal isn't a negotiation," Alexander said, looking Henderson dead in the eye. "It's a graceful exit. You sign the transfer to the trust, you take your severance, and you walk out of this building with your reputation intact. Or you fight us, and I spend the rest of my life ensuring you never sit in a room this high off the ground again." I looked at Alexander. He wasn't acting as a master, he was acting as my shield. He was using the weight of his past to ensure my future was light. "1 hour," I said, standing up. "Marcus will provide the digital signatures. Alexander and I will be in the lab." Alexander POV. Walking out of that boardroom felt like shedding a lead skin. I followed Maya toward the private elevator. We didn't speak until the doors closed, sealing us in the wood-paneled box that had seen so much of our history. The tension of the last hour began to bleed away, replaced by the familiar, electric pull of the woman standing beside me. "You were a bit of a shark in there," Maya whispered, her eyes dancing with amusement. "I thought you were a technical consultant now." "I'm a consultant who specializes in dismantling trash," I said, pulling her into my arms. "Besides, I missed the way you look when you're owning the room. I wanted to give you a reason to keep that fire in your eyes." I backed her against the wood paneling, my hands finding her waist. The ivory silk of her suit was a cool contrast to the heat of my palms. I leaned down, my mouth lingering just inches from hers. "The final deal, Maya," I murmured. "Are you sure? Once the trust takes over, you're not the titan anymore, you're just the architect." I never wanted to be a titan, Alexander. I just wanted to be heard. She reached up, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of my neck, and I think I've said everything I needed to say. Not everything, I growled, my mouth finally finding hers. The kiss was a celebration. It was the taste of a war finally won, of a debt finally paid, and of a love that had survived every cage we had built for it. In this elevator, where I had once tried to dominate her, I now found my absolute peace. The elevator hit the 91st floor, the lab. The doors opened, but we didn't step out. I stayed there holding her, watching the sun hit the high-tech equipment that had been the cause of so much pain. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Maya said, pulling back to look at the lab. "We finish the work, the real work, no more sovereign protocols, just healing." She stepped out into the light, and for the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel the need to follow her to protect her. I followed her because there was nowhere else in the world I wanted to be. Maya POV. The afternoon was spent in the lab, but it wasn't the frantic, desperate work of the fallout. It was a slow, methodical calibration of the mapping sensors. We worked side by side, Alexander handling the hardware and me refining the logic. We were a unit, a partnership of equals. Around 4 p.m., Marcus walked in. He looked younger today, his tie loosened, a genuine smile on his face. "It's done," he said. "The board signed, every single one of them." Henderson was the last to go. He left his keycard on the table and walked out without saying a word. I felt a surge of relief so profound it made my knees weak. I leaned against the console, a shaky laugh escaping me. The trust is live. As of 5 minutes ago, Marcus confirmed, the Sterling Blackwood Foundation is officially a public entity. The servers are transitioning to the UN Oversight Committee as we speak. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, "for everything." "It was an honor, Maya," Marcus said, his eyes flicking to Alexander. "Sir, the car is ready for the Hamptons." And the realtor called. "The Fortress has 3 offers above asking price." "Accept the highest one," Alexander said, not looking up from a sensor he was cleaning. "I don't care about the profit. I just want the keys out of my pocket." Marcus nodded and left. Alexander set the sensor down and walked over to me. He took my hands, his grip firm and warm. "The room is finally empty, Maya. We don't own the tower. We don't own the board. We don't even own the house." "We own the only thing that matters," I said, looking at the ring on my finger. "The final deal," he whispered. "A life without secrets." I think I can live with those terms. Alexander POV. That night, we returned to the penthouse for the last time. It felt different. The Vigil of Justice was packed in a crate, ready to be donated to a museum. The obsidian desk was gone, replaced by the oak table that was being moved to our new house. The glass walls were no longer a barrier, they were just a view. We sat on the floor of the empty living room, sharing a bottle of wine and a box of pizza. The same hole-in-the-wall pizza from the village. "You're very quiet tonight," Maya noted, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'm just realizing that this is the first night in my life that I don't have a backup plan," I admitted. "If something goes wrong tomorrow, I can't buy my way out of it. I can't leverage a rival. I just have to deal with it." "And how does that feel?" "Terrifying," I said, turning to look at her. "But looking at you, it's the best kind of fear. It means the stakes are real." I pulled her into my lap, my arms wrapping around her like she was the only solid thing in a world that was suddenly very big and very unpredictable. The physical intimacy that followed was a slow, sensory goodbye to the billionaire era. We moved together in the dark, surrounded by the echoes of our past, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was securing an asset. I felt like I was finding my soul. As the sun began to rise over the city, casting a long, golden path across the empty floor, I realized the final truth of our final deal. The room wasn't worth owning, but the person in it was worth everything. Maya POV 4M. I lay in Alexander's arms, watching the first light of dawn touch the skyscrapers. The penthouse was a shell, but my heart was full. We had survived the locked-in contract, the fallout, and the enemy. We had dismantled the cages and found the heart. I looked at the Vigil of Justice notebook, which was sitting on the last crate by the door. I reached out and pulled it toward me. I opened it to the very last page. Under Alexander's entry, her power, the light that ended the dark, I wrote the final line of Act IV. The final deal to never look back. I put the notebook in the crate and leaned into Alexander's heat. The locked-in era was a memory. The final deal was our reality. And as the city began to wake up below us, I realized that we were ready for whatever came next. Because no matter what storm we faced, we were the ones who owned the fire. Alexander POV morning. I woke up to the sound of a key turning in a lock, not our lock, the lock of the realtor who was taking over the penthouse. Maya was already standing by the door, her small bag packed, her eyes bright with a lethal, beautiful joy. She looked like the future. "Are you ready, Mr. Consultant?" she asked. "I've been ready since the gala," I said, standing up and taking her hand. We walked out of the penthouse, hand in hand. We didn't take the private elevator. We took the service stairs, laughing like teenagers. We walked through the lobby and out into the crisp Manhattan air. We didn't call a car. We walked to the subway. The locked-in era was over. The final deal was complete. And as we stepped into the crowd, lost in the rhythm of a city that no longer belonged to us, I realized that I had finally achieved the ultimate Blackwood goal. I had secured the only asset that was ever truly worth keeping. And her name was Maya. Maya POV, end of chapter 51. The subway was loud, crowded, and smelled of ozone and old coffee. I looked at Alexander, who was holding onto the silver pole, his eyes fixed on mine. He looked like just another man in a gray sweater. But to me, he was the man who had burned the world to keep me warm. We reached our stop and stepped onto the platform. "Where to now?" Alexander asked. "To the house with the big windows," I said. "The one where we make our own rules." We walked up the stairs and into the light. The final deal was signed. The claim was ours. And the world was finally, truly ours to build, together. Next chapter, Chapter 52, Public Declaration.